I wasn't sure how much I would actually learn by physically coming out here to Orania. I'm out here on top of a hill, overlooking the town. It's actually much larger and more sophisticated than I anticipated. Their infrastructure is high quality. They have their own sewage treatment. Their irrigation system is complex and intelligently designed. This is in the middle of the desert out here, and they've turned this area green through their own effort. They have public art, they have schools, technical college. There are many, many young people here. It's really great to see. But I didn't know if it would actually be worth it to physically be here. It's a long journey. It's expensive. My friend Scott from the Return to the Land PMA offered to take me out here, and I was almost hesitant because it is so expensive, and what was I actually going to learn? I knew about Irania 10 years ago. I've seen media from them. I've learned about their basic philosophy. I thought that I essentially understood the idea. But by physically being here and experiencing their spirit, their warmth, their dedication to their cause, it is truly inspiring, and I'm thinking differently about the mission that I'm a part of in America, Return to the Land. Many white Americans think of founding intentional communities for our people as effectively running away. They think that we need to mass red pill white Americans, take back our government, and essentially impose a white nationalist regime that will deport non-whites and change the character of the country from the top down. And the people who founded Irania were not seeking to simply escape the situation in South Africa. They want autonomy for their people. Ideally, they would want sovereignty. But they were very intelligent people who were organizing this in the late 80s. They bought this land in 1991, before the fall of apartheid. They recognized they had to do this because pragmatically, in order to one day, maybe, get to a sovereign state, first, they had to have a territory that was under their direct control, where they had their own land, they did their own work, and they had their own institutions. They recognized they had to build parallel institutions and have a power base that was independent of the mainstream government to ever have a chance of breaking away. And after driving through the rest of South Africa and seeing the state that it's in, and after seeing Irania, I fully expect that in the coming decades, this town will grow to become a city and eventually a fully functioning nation in the midst of, well, a third world dangerous territory. And that will have benefits, obviously, for the Afrikaners directly. It'll also benefit people in South Africa more generally because they will have a secure source of power. They might become a net exporter of food. These people are industrious. They really exemplify the virtues that, white identitarians believe that whites should have. We think that we're the people around the world who have really gone out and founded civilizations. In many cases, that is how it went, right? European colonialism brought technological development and scientific knowledge to all corners of the globe. There are very few societies that have not risen to their current level of development on the back of European people. So here is a living, breathing example that when we actually do our own work and set out and build our own institutions, we do benefit ourselves, the people around us. We are a source of order for this world when we actually take it into our own hands. it's tempting to want to simply take control of the government top down. If that were possible, I would be all for it. I'm not against having sovereignty for white Americans. I think we are a genuine ethnocultural identity. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents identified as white Americans, and really as simply Americans, because that was the American self-concept. We were a people of European ancestry, mixed European ancestry, but we had a shared story. We had our own music. We had our own culture that was authentic. And we've been told that that culture is illegitimate in the last 70 years by really people who are not us. The president or executive director of the Irania movement here, Eust Stridham, said something really insightful in an interview I had with him. He said that identity formation is not a neutral space. If you don't actively carve out your identity in this world, other hostile actors will create your identity for you. There's political power in your identity, whether you claim it or not. So it is up to us to claim our own identity, build our own institutions, do our own work, and found our own new civilization within the existing civilization. People may think it's not so bad. The temptation is there to simply enjoy the relative economic prosperity that America still offers. But since we're not exercising our right to form our own white American communities, that right is being taken away from us. With the Civil Rights Act, with the Fair Housing Act, we can't have our own businesses. We can't have our own towns in a traditional way. We have had to explore alternative legal mechanisms with Return to the Land to do this. But we have found those mechanisms, and now there are still limitations, of course. But we have to set out and start acting so that we don't just escape the mainstream system and develop autonomy from it, but also so that we can start growing that new national identity that one day our children or grandchildren will be able to grab for themselves. As America declines, as South Africa declines, Return to the Land and Irania will grow. They will ascend because we are following a tried and true method that our forefathers followed. The Boers who went on the Great Trek to found this new territory for themselves and set out a homeland for themselves. The English settlers, the Puritans, the Cavaliers, the Scots-Irish, Quakers, all these different groups, they came to America, and German groups and, eventually different European ethnicities, they blended together, but they came out here to a frontier. I shouldn't say here because I'm in South Africa. They came to North America to a frontier to build civilization. We have moved all around the world and built cities from scratch before. We can do it again, and we can actually benefit directly in doing it. We should recognize that we will have to sacrifice in some sense, but the reward spiritually, and I think ultimately financially, is absolutely worthwhile. Because what can you really secure for yourself in the mainstream economy as an individual? You can build wealth, sure, but you can't control who your neighbors are. You can't guarantee the safety of your children. Anyone can move next to you. Your area can develop in any number of ways. You have fundamentally no control. By building our own towns, which we can legally do now, look at returntotheland.org, read our legal documents. People will say, no, that's illegal, you can't do it. First of all, you probably haven't done your due diligence and research. There are ways, there are legal cutouts that actually do allow for ethnic and racial discrimination in the management of real estate. You just have to have certain kinds of legal mechanisms in place. So, but not only is it legal to do now, in order to ensure our legal right in the future, we have to set the precedent by actually physically building these communities. And you have to think about it in terms of what is moral and just. Does God reward those who believe that change should happen from a government office somewhere? Does God reward people who will support on social media and click like and share and maybe donate some money to social media influencers and politicians, but who don't actually change their lives? Is that what God will reward? Or from what we know about how the divine operates, from any perspective, any traditional European religious perspective, I think when we look at the history of our peoples, we see that those who took action themselves, who took the initiative themselves to provide for their people, God provided for them. God provided for the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims saw themselves as a chosen people. The Mormons, of course, saw themselves as a chosen people. And they went out into the desert and built a society from scratch. The Pilgrims went out into the wilderness and built a society from scratch. And now their descendants number in the millions. If you don't do that, and you have this false hope that change will just be done for you, there'll be some political savior, and top down, you're just going to get what you want, you will not be rewarded. God looks after those who look after themselves. And I mean that in a literal sense. Providence will open up opportunities when you take the first step. But if you remain inactive, if you remain drawn by the temptations of comfort and monetary gain and freedom in the sense of a lack of accountability, if you just want to remain anonymous and private, pursuing wealth however you want, whether it's moral or not, pursuing your own comfort however you want, whether it's moral or not, if you're drawn by those worldly, modern temptations, what are you really building for your posterity? Maybe in the here and now you're comfortable. Maybe you even make money. But will that money translate to a homeland for your children? The Iranians are not simply pursuing an intentional community approach. That is their step one. In order to build real sovereignty, or maybe the sovereignty concept isn't exactly right. You know, in the medieval period, nations didn't have sovereignty. And the original nationalist, Herder from the 18th century, the guy who coined the term nationalism, he didn't advocate for national sovereignty in the modern sense. He was under the Austrian or Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he believed that individual cultural national identities had to be given the right to cultural self-determination, although they could still act under this imperial structure. In Catholic medieval Europe, individual states derived their political authority from the church and from a regal line that wasn't exclusive to their own national identity. The kings and queens of Europe were related. So that sovereignty concept in the modern sense, I think we're preoccupied by. Going forward, there will be technological advancements that afford massive destructive potential to relatively small national actors. Small state actors could be global threats. And already the current hegemonic powers in this world are systematically rolling back the freedom of rogue states. So in this geopolitical order, trying to achieve an old-fashioned, modern sense of sovereignty might be totally misplaced. We might not be acknowledging the geopolitical realities that we actually live under. So by only wanting absolute statehood, absolute sovereignty, absolute self-determination, we aren't taking those initial steps towards defining who we are, towards preserving our own cultures. What I'm getting at is that it's a false dichotomy, really, between creating an intentional community and going for a traditional nationalist, ethno-nationalistic solution. They're really on a spectrum, and the Iranians see it that way. These are clever people, very intelligent people. So it's not one or the other. If you want to build freedom, you have to do that piece by piece. You have to do that by gradually expanding your territory, by gradually expanding your power base, by being energy independent, by being food independent. These people are actually doing it, and God is rewarding them with their prosperity, with their safety, with the beauty of their town as it exists now. Their kids have a wholesome environment to grow up in. This is really, honestly, like one of the best places I can imagine living. And it's in the middle of South Africa. It is incredible what they've done here. And the people, the ethno-nationalists who want top-down change and who won't actually change their lives to get there, need to come and visit these people and talk with these people, or at least online, talk with these people and talk with them about what they're trying to do. Because it's not a dichotomy. It's not either intentional community or top-down change. What we do on the ground, how human beings live, actually does shape the law. The law follows what human beings do, how they act, what institutions they form. Yes, there is precedent that already exists. Yes, there are constraints that exist. But being prevented from seeking autonomy through legal means, from the fear that you'll be sued, from the fear that you'll break the law, is absolutely pathetic. Your ancestors, if you're American, fought a global empire to have freedom. And that global empire was even relatively hands-off. Freedom meant that much to those people that they would risk their lives. They weren't worried just about being sued. People will not act in America to create something like this, despite the financial situation, the demographic situation, like the legal situation, even in many cases, being vastly superior. If we had the courage that the Afrikaners have, and the initiative, the agency to go out and found our own towns, we wouldn't just build a 3,000 person town. We could have multiple 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 person settlements. We could do that right now. There are that many people that care about our identity and want it. But we're trapped in this mentality of ethno-nationalism that, well, that's the state's job, right? The state builds the infrastructure. The state runs the schools. The state is just people. And if we start doing those things for ourselves, fill the functions that are traditionally filled by the state. Do that with a realpolitical perspective where you recognize the geopolitical order that you're a part of, you recognize the national system that you're under, you recognize its legal constraints, but then you have to bring your own economic power, your own work, your own passion to the table, your agency to the table, in order to start the negotiation process to shift those global and national forces in a direction compatible with the survival of your identity, and perhaps one day in a direction that leads to your genuine freedom as a people. But before we get to freedom as a people, as white Americans, we really have a lot of culture building work to do. People say that white Americans don't have a culture, and I disagree with that, but I see where they're coming from, because we haven't taken it into our own hands. Our ancestors did, but lately, white Americans who embrace that identity tend to be almost as immersed in the general, commercial patterns of life, video games and social media, and the same, real estate markets that the mainstream is using, the same grocery stores that the mainstream is using. They're not differentiating themselves. Another insightful thing that Eust said was, if you want to do this, make yourself as distinct as possible, as often as possible. Create that identity. To be an identitarian isn't just to embrace who you are, it is to actively create it here and now. And we have that opportunity. right now. We can build cities of thousands of our people who believe in our people. We can create spaces for our own art, for our own education, for our own businesses. We have legal constraints, but if we don't act, if we're afraid of being sued, then we don't deserve to win. Genuinely, do you believe that the universe or God will reward the people who want white nationalism in the US by having a handful of elites from our circles infiltrate government and take it over top down? Do we just trust like Nick Fuentes and the Groypers to fix everything? If you honestly, if that's the hope that you're holding out, it's pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. You have to take action yourself. And, I appreciate what Nick Fuentes does in a lot of ways, but I think he's not the only one who has this perspective. Many people in our ranks have believed for many years that we have to take back the country, that we have to mass red pill, and then somehow everything will just change from the top down. Nick's perspective is a little bit more elitist. He thinks we just have to have the right people in the right positions in government. But they know exactly who all of those people are. They know everyone who's watching Nick's show. They monitor all communications in the world. With AI technology, it is possible now. Our intelligence operations are almost second to none, maybe second to one other intelligence service in particular that has infiltrated our intelligence services and has access to all that information. So our enemies are powerful, but we have to act within the law, within the divine law, within what is moral and right and just for us to do. We have to act insofar as we can now, or we don't deserve to win. The people who haven't embraced an intentional community approach, again, it's not a false dichotomy. If you want to build your own nation, start by building your own town. That should be obvious. Of course that's the first step. Of course that's the first step. We could organize so many people, and I'm having also insights into the financial ways of going about it. We can collect resources from thousands of our people and organize land buys on the scale of thousands of acres. We can have the budget to build all the roads, to build sewage treatment, to build all of that civic infrastructure. It is what we need to do. We have to provide housing for workers to come down and develop all of that, but we have the capital at our disposal. If you're in these circles and you're investing in crypto, you're investing in the stock market, you're investing your wealth in the wider economy, what is that money actually doing for our people? You might say, well, the return on investment is going to be way higher doing it this way, buying into the mainstream system. And then when I have all that money, then I'm going to turn it to the benefit of our people. And I would say, I doubt that. Not that you won't do it. It's just it's dubious. People always think once I make money, then I'm going to do all this good stuff for humanity. But money corrupts. When you have that money, you tend just to use it for your own selfish gain, your own selfish comfort, the good of your family. And that's important. That also builds our identity, is having strong families. But wealth is not necessary to have a strong family. Strong morals is necessary. Having the space to live is necessary, but it doesn't take much. You don't need $500,000 to have a home and to feed your family. You can do it on $30,000 a year. You can do it on modest means. And, the elitists in our circles might object to that, but you can be culturally sophisticated without having massive wealth. And we can achieve that by coordinating and organizing our labor and our capital in collective projects that give us a sense of meaning. These people have a serious sense of meaning. They have also a sense of self-sacrifice. So yeah, the investors out there, you're putting your money in the mainstream system, you're trying to max your return on investment. But if you put it into a fund, like Return to the Land is going to organize a fund like this, you can contact us, join our PMA, contact us, and we can build funds to organize the next land buy. The first one, we have 150 acres. It was done relatively quickly, and we hadn't done it before. It's functional, and I appreciate the work that Peter Siri especially put into organizing it and doing the legal research necessary. But we've learned a lot, and the next one will be far more organized. We will buy the land up front, probably, maybe not the immediate next one, but the next large-scale one that now this trip has inspired me to set as my goal. The next big land buy that we'll do will be more land. We're going to develop the infrastructure. We're going to have maybe some complete housing ready to go. We'll have a plan for development. We'll have workers' housing built into the budget up front so that we can have air-conditioned spaces for young guys to come down and work and also learn at the same time. I can incorporate my school model into the workers program. We need young workers to gain skills and to build physical infrastructure for white families, to build our culture, to build our nation from the ground up. We have to do it. And if you look around you in America, our infrastructure is crumbling. Our city centers are not livable. There are a few affluent, nice areas, but they're also typically multicultural, multiracial. They're not ours. You can still benefit from them and enjoy walking around in some urban centers. It's a small handful of places, what's that place in Idaho? There are a couple like towns in Idaho. And yeah, it's white now, but there's no control on immigration between the states. There's no reason why mass numbers of Mexican immigrants won't go up to Idaho or into any region. A regional identity is not sufficient because the demographics are shifting very quickly, and there's no constraints, there's no restrictions on internal movement within the country. Once non-whites get in there, they can go wherever they please. They can buy the house next door. You can't control that unless you're in a framework like RPMA, where it's a corporate, and that's how Irania settled this territory. They formed a corporate identity. The corporation bought the land, and then residents buy shares in the corporation. That's exactly what we do. And that is the only way to do it legally in the US. So we can buy shares in a large corporation, and you don't even have to put in enough money where you can gain residency rights immediately. You can simply invest in the company. You don't even have to become a resident. If you have to make money in some other place, you can't join this. I doubt that. I mean, we have to have a self-sacrificial mentality. We have to recognize we can't have it all just handed to us. We have to do the work. We have to do our own work. So, we can invest if you have to work in the mainstream system, we can invest in a company together that buys 1,000 acres and develops, 300 home sites. We can do that legally. We can build our own sewage system. We can collectivize infrastructure. We can have more civic infrastructure included in the initial budget. There are tens of thousands of people, really hundreds of thousands of people that in principle support our cause. And we are really just paralyzed by our prosperity. They did this in South Africa. They actually achieved this here because they have it so hard. We are too used to looking for comfort, looking for prosperity. We have to look for struggle because that's how we grow. That's how we define ourselves, is in that struggle. I have learned a lot from these people. I am seeing much more clearly the path forward. Some ideas in terms of institutions, we need a financial center for us where investors can invest their money in the corporation. It develops the real estate and sells it to individual families. They can finance out the houses, and then that corporation can return investment to investors. So it's not just it's not even a sacrifice at that point. If you join the PMA, you can invest your money to support the cause instead of investing in the mainstream system. We shouldn't be investing in the mainstream system anymore. We should be investing in our own institutions. So we can do that. We can provide young men with work opportunities, with education, And there's really no reason to wait in any of this. And if we wait, we won't be establishing that legal precedent that we need to establish. If we don't set out and build white American communities and a white American culture for today, then when people say there is no white American identity, there is no white American culture, it's illegitimate, they'll have a point, because we would not have actually gone out and done the work to build it for ourselves. Just expecting the government to do it for you is lazy, and it's not worthy of your identity. And it is a noble identity. It is something that has legitimacy. It's something that is world-changing, world-shaping, world-conquering, and still will be. And when we form these communities, and when we scale them, and when we recruit other white Americans, when they see, like right now, it's, a few dozen people living in the middle of Arkansas. It's not that impressive. It's a step. It's good that we've at least got started, and hardly anyone else has. But for all the nationalists in America, why have you not started with communities to build up to political influence? Politicians need an education, and we don't control our own education. Why not do all of this for ourselves from the ground up? They're not mutually exclusive strategies. So it's not a dichotomy. The intentional community path is a path that is the beginning of sovereignty, if you want to call it that, and we can grow. There's no limit to how far we get down that path. It's not, full sovereignty or bust. It's rather, there's a spectrum between being subject to the broader system and being independent. And we have to move towards independence through our own effort. Anything short of that, again, is not worthy of our ancestors, is not worthy of this identity that we claim for ourselves and we take pride in. Come visit Irania and see what they are doing for themselves. It's inspiring. I might want, even though we have to collect investment and workers for a larger land buy in America, and this trip is expensive, I almost want to organize a much larger trip of people who support intentional communities for white Americans to come here and see this, because you have to see it for yourself. Hopefully the documentary we're making captures something of it, but yeah, it is really something else. It's an inspiration, so I didn't know what I would learn coming to Orania. It is absolutely worth it, and when I come back, I'm going to be more aggressive in my pursuit of our goals. I'm going to increase the scope of our goals. We've been not short-sighted, but just we're thinking too small so far. We have to think on larger scales. We have to organize on larger scales, and we have to support each other. We have to appreciate that we're all part of the same project, a homeland for our people where our children will be safe. We want to grow as a people together. And so the different social media influencers out there, we can't have petty rivalries and petty jealousies, especially among American influencers. We have to support one another. We have to. I would talk to any American right-winger. I've always been extremely open. I'll talk to anyone. We have to be open to talking. We have to be willing to share each other's work and celebrate each other's work. And the more we can do it together, the better. Instead of having a bunch of influencers living in different places, and I hate that term too, but whatever, that's kind of the parlance now. Instead of having them living scattered all over the country, we can bring them together and enhance their sense of identity by allowing them to live according to their values. And we have to move away from this lifestyle where the people who are out there advocating for nationalism are really living as individuals, and they're individually benefiting by, in large part from contributions from the right wing. Most of the money that white nationalists have given for the cause has gone to individual gain. That's really just how it is. And it has to be that way to an extent, because someone has to put themselves at risk. And you can't have a mainstream job and do this kind of thing. Someone has to take the time to become a good speaker, to become a good advocate, to become informed on the ideology, to become informed on what it would take to get to our political objectives. We do need a specialized class, and you need to reward that behavior, reward that financially, or else it won't happen. So we have to be more generous with the people who are supporting the cause, but also we should expect the people who are supporting the cause to live up to the cause, live in community. People like Jared Taylor, I think, are making that step. And more, I think, of the good-hearted people on our side will be making that step. In the near future, we will see it. And the content will get better because we'll exchange ideas more. We will live that sense of identity more. We'll define that identity more. And we'll continue following in the footsteps of really, in a lot of ways, our betters here, Afrikaners, Oranians, who have forged the path that we must follow. It's not that you're relegating yourself only to an intentional community. It is that's the beginning of a nation. That's how nations organically form. In the past, think of any nation. It started with a village. It started with a community, and it grew to a town, and it grew to multiple towns, and it colonized other areas and expanded its regional influence until it was a nation. That's how nations are formed. In fact, so if you're an authentic nationalist, you better join a community or form a community. These well-established identities in Europe, it's somewhat of a different story, but given the geopolitical realities, given the realities of national politics in all these different places, it may become necessary in all those European countries as well. And in a way, I'd almost say it's better. I know that's hard to hear. People embrace the identity that they're comfortable with, that they've grown up with, but we need identities for the future. We need to reorganize our societies from the ground up to be maximally competitive, maximally authentic to our history, and we can't just trust what we've been given. We have to embrace the given and take it to the next level. And we can only do that if we consciously create our life for ourselves collectively. That conversation has to begin. So we're having an intentional community conference February 9th. You can go to intentionalcommunity.live and sign up. It's $30. We need to raise funds for these efforts. And also, we don't want unserious people in attendance. It's a private conference for ticketed members. There will be prominent speakers, Jared Taylor, Lucas Gage, the Woodlander, Eustace Stridham, and others. I apologize if I am not mentioning you, and I've already spoken with you about this, but big names. There'll be legal consultation present. We're going to brainstorm different ideas. We have to move the conversation forward. It is time to move the conversation forward. If you can't even show up for a conference, really reflect. Are you willing to do what it takes to save your people? Are you willing to do what it takes? Will you spend $30 and show up to a conference and talk with the people who are actually making the change? Will you even do that? Will you move from where you're living? Will you gain the necessary skills? Will you invest? Or are you only going to support the mainstream system? Are you only going to support the beast, Mammon, Globo Homo, whatever you want to call it? Are you only going to live in that world? Or are you going to join your people in our struggle for survival? Learn from the Iranians, learn from the Afrikaners. They are showing the way, and they are an inspiration. So, thank you for listening. God bless.